So, Paul, quick question, and really, do people fail to show appreciation?
You can tell from just the messages that we get from people in the workplace that they don't feel valued, they don't feel appreciated.
What was it about your personal journey that made you realize that helping people demonstrate value towards each other?
Yeah, so I grew up in the context of a family-owned business outside of Kansas City in the middle of the U.S., and I was dealing with the family issues intertwined with those because...
Hey there, before we get started, I want to share something really important with you. I started The Few with one thing in mind, and that was to help you close the gap between what you want and where you are today to live the life you've always dreamed of. We've scoured the world to find the best guests to inspire you on that journey. Who better to learn how to be one of the few than those that already are? Individuals that do live life on their terms and have achieved their life dream. Subscribe to The Few with Boo now. Join our community. If you find these episodes valuable, the more subscribers we have, the more listeners we get, the greater the guests we bring on the show. To subscribe now, hit the button, and let's dive into this episode of The Few. Is psychologist and author of a book that has been revised once, is almost in its third revision in as many years. Dr. Paul White, thank you so much for joining me on The Few today. I really appreciate you taking time and being generous.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be with you.
So, Paul, quick question, and really the obvious starting point is: do people fail to show appreciation? If there's a practice and you help people on their journey to show, that must mean that by and large, are we seeing an absence? Has it got worse? Do we not appreciate those around us?
I don't know if it got worse, but the need is huge. And as you can tell from just the messages that we get from people in the workplace that they don't feel valued, they don't feel appreciated. And there's a lot of behavioral and organizational results of that. I mean, one study shows that 79% of the people who leave a job voluntarily cite a lack of appreciation as one of the major reasons that they leave. MIT and Massachusetts Institute of Technology last year published a study about the Great Resignation that happened here in the States, at least, that cultural issues and specifically a lack of appreciation was 3 more times likely to predict people leaving than compensation issues. So it seems to be important to people, and it impacts businesses and companies and organizations if they don't pay attention to it.
So there must have been a point in your life, Paul, where a light bulb illuminated above your head and you thought, or you observed the behaviors in the workplace where this lack of appreciation was obvious. What was it about your personal journey that made you realize that helping people demonstrate value towards each other is absolutely critical to living a full life and also running a successful, growing business?
Yeah, so I grew up in the context of a family-owned business outside of Kansas City in the middle of the U.S. And as a result, in the middle of my career, I was approached by business consultants who worked with successful family businesses and dealing with business succession issues. And I was dealing with the family issues intertwined with those because there's a lot of them, and how to be fair to people who aren't in the business and all that. And I was working with a business in North Carolina, and I was talking to the father who was the CEO, and I said, how's this succession plan going? He says it's going well. My son's stepping up. I think it's going to go fine. And I walk across the hall, talk to the son, ask him the same question, and he says, this is a disaster. It's not going to work. I can't ever please my dad. And so at the same time, my wife and I were reading The 5 Love Languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote about personal relationships. And it's a great book. It's sold 25 million copies. And I thought, maybe this concept of showing love or whatever the equivalent is in the workplace, could be applied. And so I pursued Dr. Chapman for a year and finally got to meet with him. And he agreed to work with me on this project. And so we dialogued and sort of thought appreciation was the most equivalent concept in the workplace, and then proceeded to, and essentially sort of translate the 5 love languages into what it looks like in the work.
And what are they? What The Five Love Languages was a fairly profound book, wasn't it? And profound for a lot of people, in just having some simple concepts to connect with your family members or your partner. Do they translate directly across to the workplace, or how do you define them?
The same in name as the five love languages, but they differ in what they look like. So, words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and even physical touch. And so, uh, yeah, I can give you a little example of each if you'd like.
Yeah, let's start with physical touch because that seems to be something that's almost like whoa in the workplace in today's workplace. My goodness, danger, danger.
It's true. Dr. Cheb and I dialogued about it and talked to people, and they said, well, we can see it, but it feels sort of weird and need to be careful. But he had studied anthropology, and he was really strong. And I agree with him that we didn't want to advocate a touchless society, even in the workplace, because it's well known that appropriate physical touch can be deeply meaningful and even healing in the appropriate context and relationship. And secondly, it occurs. And we've found is that it's largely spontaneous celebration, right? It's a high five when you finish a project. It's a fist bump when you solve a problem, maybe a congratulatory handshake. And cross-culturally, because our book's been translated in 25 languages and our assessments in 7 or 8, cross-culturally, a pat on the back has been found to be the most appropriate way of showing appreciation. But there's some cultures that are far more warm to it, if you will. Our friends in Southern Europe, the Spaniards and the Greeks and Portuguese are more physical, as are the Hispanics in the United States, whereas Northern Europeans, the Germans, Norwegians, and so forth, they have some struggles with it. And then in Asia, like in Japan, the only appropriate physical touch would be a handshake. And so you have to be aware of cultural differences. And the other part is that it's the recipient who determines what's appropriate, right? I mean, I've had people come and say, I need to give you a hug. And I'm like, well, your need doesn't mean I'm willing to take it. So, you
Yeah.
have to go with what the recipient's willing.
Yeah, well, look, asking for permission in anything, right? I mean, that's you can scale that consent conversation all the way up to sexual intimacy, but I think that's important as well. And that, I mean, that's another way of showing appreciation, I guess, is respecting someone's boundaries and what they're comfortable with. I mean, as for the Germans, they just created schnapps, right? I think that's how they bond and Oktoberfest. Okay, so touch is important. There's a very visceral element to human touch, be it anywhere. And I know in British culture, maybe American, Australian culture, it's that rough and tumble kind of touch, or has historically been that kind of very masculine touch. So how do you scale that out when you start to look at the acceptance of different genders, sexualities? I mean, how do you let's just say I'm a CEO of a company. I've read your book. I agree. I think touch is great in the workplace. How do I articulate it to everyone in the team in a way that everyone feels
Yeah.
safe?
So, I mean, first of all, uh, I think it's helpful to keep it in context. So we have an online assessment that we created that over 375,000 people have taken to date, and so we have a pretty good database. And physical touch is actually less than 1% of the population, so it's not a high frequency kind of occurrence. And it's mainly educating people about cultural differences, like in the United States. In the South, they're a little more physical. They maybe give side hugs. In New York and New Jersey, this is what physical touch looks like there. It's just, hey, just sort of a nod across the room, right? So you have to be aware of those. So there's an education and awareness. And then, and we acknowledge that, but we really focus on the others because that's where, obviously the vast majority of people lie.
Words of affirmation. I was working with an organization, a couple of organizations actually. And what I was really fascinated by, and I'd be interested to get your opinion on this, is what I felt was like manufactured affirmation in terms of this concept of recognition points. And as a team or an organization, you could basically go into an app and give someone a recognition point. It wasn't even like you would speak to them. It was like a remote a remote acknowledgement of their effort. I mean, is that a word of affirmation, or what does it actually look like?
Well, yeah, I can't think of a better word than a bastardization of it. So it's a distortion of it. In fact, this afternoon, I got through writing a blog on peer-to-peer recognition within platforms and all that. And it's sort of a nice nod to it, but it really doesn't work. Words of affirmation are words that are affirming, right? That we affirm the value and what we appreciate about somebody. And a difference between a sort of manufactured compliment, if you will, or recognition, and one that's perceived as genuine is the specificity. That the more specific you are about, hey, John, thanks for staying late and cleaning up the conference room so that tomorrow we know that we're good to go when we have that meeting early on. That's very specific versus, in fact, we've got 95,000 people on our newsletter list, and we'll do polls, and we ask, what don't you like to hear? And one of the main things people don't like to hear is good job, because it's generic. It doesn't mean anything. You can say it to anybody. You can say it to your dog. It doesn't take any thought, and so you've got to be specific about it. And that's where words are important. And an additional piece about that is talking about a person's character, right? So there's a difference between, hey, thanks for getting your reports to me on time, which is good, and saying, hey, Becky, I just really appreciate how dependable you are. Because when you talk about a person's character, that's behavior over time, different settings with different people. And that really will grab a person's heart for whom words is important.
I have an opinion in life that acts of service just generally are good for every, the person that benefits from the act of service is actually the person giving the service more than the person receiving it. Again, in the workplace, what is it? What do acts of services look like? Is this where someone sort of may say, "Oh, look, that's not my job," or "The sink's dirty," and it's like, "Well, I don't clean the sink. I'm too good for that." I mean, how do active services manifest in the work?
Yeah, so acts of service, it's not rescuing a low performing colleague, first of all, because sometimes people think, okay, I'm always rescuing them. It's not that. Probably it's small things that are just helping them in today or this week get things done. Two sort of common contexts. One, in a business setting, it's when you're working on a project that's time limited and you're banging away on it. You got to work hard, long hours. What's something somebody can do to help make that go better? And it could be that they're going to answer your emails or your phone so you can stay focused on the project. It could be bringing in, some dinner for you so you work over dinner. It could be that you delegate part of it and they take part of the project and help you out, or some clerical work, just simple stuff that you don't need to do, but it needs to be done. That's one context. In clinical settings like hospitals and where you're providing services, it's when a whole bunch of patients show up all at once and you are swamped. What's something somebody can do to help out to make that flow better? And I didn't mention on words, it's about 45% of the population choose words. So it's a big group, but it's less than half of all employees. So if you only use words, you're missing half of your employees. And acts of service is about 21%. So out of every 5 people. And they sort of live by the mantra, don't tell me you care or support me, show me, or words are cheap. So if you're just talking to them all the time and don't ever help them out, that's probably not going to go well.
I heard somewhere that men are more inclined towards active service as a way of demonstrating love or affirmation, I guess, appreciation. Is there truth in terms of genders around these acts as well?
It's been a fascinating study, and we have done research over time and continue that there's virtually no gender difference in any of the languages of how frequently people choose them. They're almost exactly the same. Now, what's different is the specific actions that are desired by. And in fact, we found that in our assessment, just finding out a person's preferred appreciation language is fine, but it's not really sufficient because you need to know the specific actions because especially in acts of service, you need to know what's going to be helpful to them as opposed to just saying, their desk is, it looks a wreck and they need some help with the organization. You don't want to dive into that. You need to find out, what would be helpful.
So I guess the simple solution to that is if you want to perform an active service for someone, it's not to assume what they need help with, it's to ask, what they need help with, or what can I do for you?
The problem with that is that at least in the States, and I think it would be true in Australia, that the people's first response, I mean, if you say, hey, is there something I can do to help? The first response is, no, I'm good. I'm okay. And so you have to push through that. Or a better way to approach it is to say, hey, I've got some extra time here free, and I know you're pushing hard on this. What would be helpful that I could do that would be help to you? So it's instead of a yes, no, do you want help? It's like, what would be helpful? And they're more likely to let you know at that point.
And I guess most people want to be a decent person, and they want to show appreciation, and they want to help people. But what gets in the way? Like, what's happening day to day that stops people from doing this?
Well, that's a deep question, actually. There's lots of,
Oh, we like to go deep. We like to go deep.
part of it is, we're focused on what we need to do, and we tend to have an individualistic perspective on it versus understanding how helping teammate really helps us as a group. And there's the time pressure that occurs in the workplace. I find that a lot of supervisors and managers actually increase stress by setting artificial time deadlines that are shorter than they need to be. That they say, they need it Wednesday. They say, I really need it by Monday. Well, that creates stress for the person, and then that just sort of spreads around. Sometimes you're not sure what to do or how to do it in the way that they want. And so it takes, and this is true for appreciation. We believe that appreciation is a person to person. It's not organizationally driven. It's not according to the org chart. Anybody can show appreciation to one another. And so it requires some relationship. I've been asked by, some multinational large corporations to help them with appreciation with virtual teams that have never met. And I said, I'm not sure this is going to work. And for the first trial, it didn't. We're learning some things that, and there's actually some new neuroscience that comes out that's showing that face-to-face, in-person interaction is qualitatively different than face-to-face, virtual. And so really encouraging virtual teams to get together at least once a year, if not a couple times a year, to spend time to get together, because you get to know people, you see them in different settings, and trying to communicate appreciation outside of a relationship just feels weird, and it feels pretty artificial, I think.
Yeah, I think that whole remote working environment, we probably haven't felt the real ongoing effects of that yet. I think we see it in terms of busyness and people just getting lost in work, and losing that ability to, you don't see body language, for example, right? Like when you're working remotely, you can't see any of those subconscious cues. All right, so there's a love language. The third love language, like they say, is gifts, which could probably again, in the workplace, be potentially dangerous territory. What does a gift look like in the office?
Yeah, so we define it. It's not bonuses, it's not raises, it's not winning, or earning a big vacation. It's really small things that show that you're getting to know the other person. It's like bringing in your favorite cup of coffee for you in the morning, or tea, or bringing in a snack that that they like. Or it could be you see a magazine about their favorite sports team, and you pick that up and give that to them and say, hey, I know you like, the black shirts or whomever it might be. And it can be virtual too. It's really interesting that gifts in this context it's not related to how much money you spend, because in this case, it is the thought that counts. It's that you're getting to know the person. And so let's say you have a colleague that's going to coach rugby for the first time for their son. And so you find a website that has some training exercises, to use for his coaching. You say, hey, I thought you might enjoy this. Or if somebody's starting a garden, and you find a resource that way. So it's just small things like that. It's the personal nature that's really important. And so gift giving in the workplace is just done stupidly generally. I mean, it's like in the States, there's a lot of gifts given from one company to another at Christmas time, and you get a fruit basket. Yeah. Means nothing to anybody, right? It needs to be person to person. If you want to give a gift, it's actually from you to the person that you relate to at that job. And also, some research has shown that the most effective gift is given when it's least expected. So wait until late January or February to give a gift, not at the holiday, right? And it's going to have more. So, and that's 7% of the workforce. And what's interesting is most employee recognition and reward programs really focus on this, tangible gift, and literally billions of dollars are wasted by companies just throwing out gifts that don't really have much impact, even though it's a small percentage. Because people say, if I never hear anything, if you never stop by, see how I'm doing, or help me out when I need help, a gift doesn't feel like much, especially if the company's paying for it. But if you can pair a gift with one of their other languages, and if it's personal, they can really have a nice impact. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a gift that's the same as the other 1,000 company embossed pens isn't really a gift, right? It's just a token effort to and look at that's a bit of an issue, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like there's an acknowledgement that organizations and leaders need to do this, but it's done in a very superficial way, isn't it? Like and then people wonder why it doesn't work. And then people get frustrated. And I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he's like, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this. He says, all my people want is more. No matter what I give them, no matter how much we give them, they always want more. Is that the fact that people just are never happy and they want more, or are they just not giving the right things?
No, I think it's a combination of, could be a combination of both, but clearly we know that people, even though there's all kinds of employee recognition programs and so forth, one study showed that 65% of all North Americans in the U.S. and Canada said they haven't received any recognition in the past year. And I'm like, how could that be? Well, the key word is they haven't received it. It's like we're doing things, but it doesn't really get to them. It's sort of like sending a gift via the mail and it doesn't show up. You sent it, you meant well, but they didn't receive it. And so I think a lot of time leaders and organizations are doing things and they're just sort of running on this, wheel versus stopping. And in fact, one of the things I tell teams when we're training them is, I'm not here to create another to-do list for you. You've already got at least two, one, your regular one, and then, project one. You don't need a recognition or appreciation list. What I'm here to do is help teach you how to show appreciation in a way that you're either almost doing or doing that needs to be tweaked a little bit. And we want to when we get the right action in the right language, it doesn't take much, and doesn't have to be all the time. You don't have to throw a party and say, "Hey, Shelly showed up today." Yeah, it really can have a big impact with when you get the right message and action.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you look at those your documentaries or series on startups like WeWork, and there's just always events and free stuff, but you see that it very much speaks to that crowd, which is a 20-something crowd that don't have family and kids, and they're just looking for exciting, fun times. And that to me seems like examples where the five languages are absolutely nailing it culturally. Where it might get a little bit more difficult is in more of these established companies where you're running from young 20 or low 20-year-old kind of graduates all the way up to 60-year-old executives, and everyone's kind of trying to pull in the same way. So I presume some thought needs to be put into that as well, right? The level or the age of acute.
Yeah, we've done research on looking at different levels or what different generations value as far as appreciation. And one clear trend is that the younger the employee, especially 40 and under, the more likely they are to value quality time. Now, it's still words is number one for almost everybody, except in a very couple specific settings. But quality time for the general population is about 25%. So one out of every four. For younger employees in their 20s, it's up to 35%, right? And then if you look at older employees, 60 and above, that, what do we do for people that, to honor them when they're retiring, they reach some goal or whatever? We give them something, right? Gifts is only 2% of the older generations what they want. What they want is they would like some personal message to know how they've impacted other people. It's not just, don't just, hey, you're a great guy and service. It's like, I saw you model, this kind of leadership of listening or whatever. And so we missed the boat partly out of this drive to scale everything up versus understanding that, yeah, we have to do some things as big groups, but ultimately we're all individuals and we're people. And that's really our message, is that employees are people and we have value as people beyond just performance. And recognition programs tend to focus on performance and miss a big group that are great people, but they aren't your top performers necessarily.
Yeah, and there's a degree of dysfunction with high performing people, isn't there? I mean, if you're high performing in the workplace, you're typically not performing in other elements of your life. There's no miracle human being, is there? And that would make sense, I guess, because as you get older and you start to have done everything and seen everything, you start to value giving back. That feels more purposeful than just doing the same thing for the 30th year in a row. Whereas when we're younger, it's all about us. It's all about me. And that's, you just don't have the awareness, do you? You're just a sponge. So that's a really neat way of kind of articulating the different expressions of the love language. And you mentioned there the concept of quality time. And the importance for that for the younger generation. Gosh, it's almost like we had an abundance of quality time during COVID with lockdown. What does quality time mean in a relationship? It's obviously going out on a date together, creating time and space, sitting on the couch, just being present with each other. We can't go and sit on the beanbag together in the company lounge, yeah. Um, so quality time in the
It's
context.
actually, there's a generational difference on what quality time means to people in the workplace. In past days, it meant time with your supervisor or manager. In fact, there was a saying, people don't leave a job, they leave a manager, right? And that's less true than it used to be. Still, for a number of people, especially older employees, having individual sort of face-to-face time, what we would call focused attention, of getting some individual time to listen, share observations, get input, is highly valued by some. But for younger employees, it's more about time with peers and colleagues. In fact, I tell leaders, especially older leaders, just because you have a team member who has quality time as their language doesn't mean they want time with you. You may be great, you might be wonderful, but I've had people say, I don't want time with my supervisor. They're pretty intense. I'm sort of shy, but I want to go out to lunch or out after work with my friends, or go to a sporting event. So it's more about that collegial aspect for most younger employees.
It's it's fascinating, isn't it? In terms of even 20 years ago, when you were a leader or a supervisor, you had all this extra knowledge that the people working for you didn't have. And it's sort of flipped on its head now. It's like the connected generation has so much more information and context to what they do each and every day, that it presents these. Yep, it does challenge that kind of patriarchal, hierarchical type of mindset. So if I was working, and let's just say I'm a leader, I've come into an organization, and the culture is clearly toxic. Like the people aren't talking to each other. It's deathly quiet as you walk around through the office. Uh, what what are some of the cues to realize that is some organizations so toxic there's nothing you can do about it, or can every toxic environment be resolved? And what, in your mind, what does a toxic environment look like, and how do we get out of it?
Yeah. So interestingly, initially when I was going out and speaking and training on appreciation, at breaks and afterwards, people would come up and tell me nasty stories about their workplace or what a jerk their boss was. And it just kept coming at me. And so I wound up, we did research on toxic workplaces and wrote a book about it, and have some training about it, and found that it really has three key components, largely. One is a sick system, meaning that just the way this company or organization is structured doesn't work right. And you think in the U.S., at least hospitals, government agencies, colleges and universities, they have multiple reporting relationships, and so it's hard to have sort of hold people accountable. There's indirect communication versus direct communication, and so a sick system is part of it. A toxic leader is part of it, and the core aspect of a toxic leader is that they're all about themselves. I mean, they use people and resources for their goals, and you've got to watch out because they don't care about you. And then the third part are dysfunctional colleagues, which are people who make excuses, blame other people. They're good at creating conflict sort of as a smoke screen. They, and they take credit for things that they didn't do, so forth. And if you get the combination of that, it's pretty nasty. And, a toxic workplace by definition is unhealthy. I mean, it starts to wear away at your health. You're not sleeping well. You're worrying a lot. You're having physical issues. You're starting to be emotionally reactive, and people don't want to, your family doesn't want to be around you, And so those are the kinds of things. Now, can you turn it around? Yes, maybe sometimes. I hold the belief, at least, that a true toxic leader, somebody that's just purely about themselves, you can't fix. You got to get rid of them because they just create a toxic environment around them, and they sort of have a revolving door of people that just keep going and getting fired and all that.
Yeah, because that's the interesting. I mean, if you're a people manager, and you've got one of those people, how to tell the difference whether someone can be rehabilitated or not, and how long do you try and rehabilitate them, and how much damage do you incur until you come to the conclusion, actually, this person's a sociopath. We can't have them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a tough call. And I would say most people hang on too long. That they give too many chances because, and part of it is a good toxic leader, if you want to, is they look good initially. I mean, they're skilled, they're socially skilled, they're smooth. But after a while, you see that, oh man, pay attention to the sign. And a key message, if you are working in an unhealthy workplace, is you need to take care of yourself. Do your job. Don't get sucked into the toxicity and trying to prove things, whatever, because then if you're not doing your work, you're at risk for getting booted. And you've got to pay attention to your health. Get an objective, somebody that you trust their judgment, bounce ideas off them. Because when you're in a toxic workplace, it's like being in a room with fumes. You start to get foggy and you're not thinking right. You say, well, I didn't think this was ethical to do this, but they're saying it is. And so you've got to get somebody who's thinking more clearly and get their feet.
No, that's really great advice. So you have a practice, appreciation at work, which provides tools, resources, coaching for organizations to demonstrate their appreciation in a more proactive way, and it obviously has a more profound impact than just showing appreciation, right? Like there's downstream effects, and it lifts the revenue line, improves profit margins, efficiencies, productivity. But if I was listening to this podcast and I was thinking, you know what, yeah, you're right. I don't know whether we do appreciation that well. What would I do? How do I start my journey?
Yeah, so our sort of mothership website is appreciationatwork.com, and it's the word at, not the at side, but appreciateatwork.com. There's all kinds of resources. We have you have the book. The book is an easy read, and it's in audio.
It might be a nice gift for someone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have online assessment. There's a code that comes with the book, but there's also, we developed more expanded and specialty codes for medical settings, for schools, government, and all that kind of thing. And so start to explore and see and learn the difference between appreciation and recognition, and then, how to show appreciation. And I would just say, start somewhere with somebody, I mean, it's easy to sort of think about it theoretically and structure stuff. And I've worked with engineers and computer guys that they want to do Gantt charts and spreadsheets. And it's just like, dude, just go tell somebody that you value them, And so and that's a starting point, is to think about somebody that you work with, that if they didn't do what they did, your daily work would be a lot tougher, right? And if you have a key team member that you don't want to lose, you need to make sure, because otherwise they may be, sort of on the trading block looking around. And the third group is, just people that are discouraged, that they're working hard on a project, it's not working well, and appreciation can be very encouraging to people. So, and we have, I grew up in the not-for-profit social service world professionally, and people give a lot. There's a lot of money for training. So it was important to me to create low-cost training materials. And so we've done that and have an online train the trainer program that we have a number of people in Australia that have gone through it, as well as New Zealand. and then they can take that. It gives them access to the training resources of videos and handouts and facilitators guide that they can take groups and teams at their workplace through to learn how to communicate it. And it's really important to understand that it's not just for supervisors and managers, but it's for colleagues to learn how to show appreciation to one another. That's where the real power is.
It's funny, isn't it? In life, it's the simple things that have the profound impact, isn't it? And it's really what you're talking about here conceptually is not very difficult. I mean, it's five languages. There's no perfect system, but it's perfect enough to get the ball rolling. And as you go through life, I guess you're forever learning what appreciation looks like to others. But the mindfulness of being aware of it is fantastic. Dr. Paul White, thank you so much for joining me on The Few. It was just a wonderful nuance to explore the difference between, appreciation and recognition, and being able to pull apart from that performance-based culture of goals and recognition, and just generally be aware of others, and to really be cognizant of what good looks like for them, and the style that they feel appreciated. If you're looking for more information, appreciationatwork.com is the primary resource to reach out, find Paul and his team. But also, and you can also buy the book online, as well as Amazon and any other great retailer. So, Paul, thank you again so much for being generous with your time and helping us be better versions of ourselves.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.